The Westport Center for Senior Activities is a home away from home for many to come and explore their talents, pursue their hobbies, challenge their minds and bodies, and socialize in a welcoming, accepting, and warm environment. Many choose to learn a new language, try a musical instrument, try their hand at drawing or painting, or continue to enhance a skill they've developed over the years under the instruction of professionals who realize the importance of lifelong learning. Over the years, the Westport Center for Senior Activities and the Westport Public Art Collections have partnered to display and share art throughout the center's hallways and rooms. Westport is known for its art history, and what better place to display this than in the center where many of the artists currently or once partook in classes. I invite you to come and take a stroll and enjoy all that is on display.
Years in the making, the 2008 documentary directed by Westport filmmaker Martin West and produced by Ann Chernow, Ada Lampert, and Kristen Fox McKinney features in-depth interviews and studio visits with 50 Westport artists over 70 years of age. Among the featured artists is Leonard Everett Fisher, a world-renowned Pulitzer Prize-winning children's book illustrator, educator, and contemporary painter who modestly describes himself as a third-generation doodler. When asked what motivates his creativity and passion, Fisher responds succinctly, "We are all teachers and students our entire life." Leonard and his wife Marjorie moved to Westport in 1957, and from here they raised 3 children who attended Westport Public Schools. Marjorie also worked as the library media specialist at Coleytown Middle School for 25 years. During that time, Marjorie guided the automation of the library, assisted with the change from junior high to middle school, served as advisor to the student government, and began a service program for students. Leonard Everett Fisher presented the painting Oranges as a gift to the town and public schools in 1993 in honor of her retirement. A compositional and technical masterwork of light, form, color, and brushwork, Oranges continues to inspire the lifelong learners of Westport.
Depicting the foreboding moment before the storm, John Stewart Curry harnesses emotions of awe and fear as the dark clouds of the tornado gather on the horizon. Seen in profile, the man's body is taut against the storm. One hand grips his youngest child. The woman cradles a child at her breast while her eyes remain fixed on the safety of the older children as they seek refuge in the earthen bunker. The circular composition of the figures reinforces the contrast between the nurturing comfort of family and the destructive spiral of the tornado. Curry produced this lithograph in 1932 after gaining critical acclaim from East Coast audiences for his paintings Baptism in Kansas and Tornado Over Kansas, produced in 1928 and 1929, respectively. These 2 canvases firmly established Curry as a foremost talent, who along with Thomas Hart Benton and Grant Wood came to define the movement known as American regionalism. Curry lived in Westport when he produced this lithograph, undoubtedly spurred on by the rich community of artists and illustrators who surrounded him. Among the Westport artists that John Stewart Curry befriended was sculptor J. Clinton Shepard. A fellow Midwesterner, 10 years Curry's senior, Shepard had served in World War I before settling in Westport and pursuing a career in the arts. The bronze sculpture, The Doughboy, which today commemorates local veterans of the Great War on Westport's Veterans Green, was crafted by Shepard and dedicated in 1930 following the first Memorial Day parade. In this group portrait, Curry presents the sculptor's wife, Gail, reading at home with their 3 young children, daughter Joy and sons Edward and Charles, who holds a favorite toy. Curry must have found solace among his fellow artists and their families in Westport. 2 years after the death of his first wife in 1932, Curry married Kathleen Gould Shepard, who was divorced from the sculptor's brother. While the Currys moved to Wisconsin in 1936 and the Shepherds to Florida in 1938, the families maintained contact with each other and with Westport through the enduring gifts of their artwork.
In 1923, artists Ralph and Rebecca Hunt Boyer moved from Greenwich Village to Westport with their young daughter Becky, seen here. At their Coleytown property, art and nature commingled with daily life, spawning creativity in all three. Ralph cherished his only child, and he painted Becky's portrait in 1929 at age 7, and again in 1939 at 16 years old. In each, he tenderly captured her character and spirit. Becky grew up with a pencil in her hand. "If it wasn't a pencil, it was a paintbrush," she said late in life. Following in her father's footsteps, Becky became an accomplished commercial illustrator and was most renowned as a botanical painter, which sprang from her parents' inspiring love of the outdoors and eye for natural beauty. In October 1960, she became the first woman artist to have her work published on the cover of Reader's Digest with a painting of splayed forest ferns. The magazine went on to publish another 8 covers of her botanical paintings.
My name is Meigs Burrows, and this is a lenticular portrait of my mother taken when she was 17 years old from her high school yearbook, and a photo I took of her when she was 97. So in the blink of an eye between these two images, she has lived 80 years. And I guess the point of this portrait was to demonstrate how timeless beauty can be and how fleeting life can be, which is something we should all take to heart and live life to the fullest.
The 1920s represented an era of new possibilities for women pursuing professional careers in many fields, including fine art and illustration. Following training at Chicago School of the Art Institute and success selling fashion illustrations to magazines and department stores, including Marshall Field's, Alice Harvey and her friend, illustrator Helen Hokanson, decamped to New York. Working together and separately, Harvey and Hokanson achieved what the New Yorker editor Harold Ross termed the new humor. From the magazine's inception, Harvey and Hokanson provided witty and insightful cartoons and cover designs appealing to audiences throughout the 1930s and 40s. Alice Harvey married advertising copywriter Charles Ramsey in 1925, and much to the dismay of New Yorker editor Ross, moved to the suburbs, settling in Westport in 1929. Illustration for books and magazines provided a professional outlet, while painting and leading classes at a small studio in Cannondale provided personal subsistence. Rendered with varying line quality and luminous brushwork, the Winter Bouquet of Flowers in Window displays Alice Harvey Ramsey's mature sensibility and assured hand of a lifetime of artistic work.
Dick Rao came to botanical painting after a long career in the film business. While he was still working, he enrolled in the botanical illustration program at the New York Botanical Gardens, as he loved to draw, especially trees. At age 76, he completed his Ph.D. in plant sciences, and he embarked on a second career teaching botany courses for artists. Wherever Dick goes, he is always on the lookout for interesting plant forms that appeal to his senses. Let's hear what Dick, now 95, has to say about his illustration of witch hazel, one of the many brown, dry-looking stragglers found in our fall and winter landscape.
That one belongs to the Westport Senior Center, right over the fireplace. Yeah. And that's witch hazel. That's the fruit of the witch hazel. Actually, you don't see the seeds because these black areas inside, the seeds have sometimes get propelled by gas. So when these things open up, the black seeds inside go flying, and this is what's left.
This is Matthew Levine. I'm the son of the painter and caricaturist David Levine, here to discuss his work, Road, Sherwood Island, which he painted sometime in the mid to late 50s or maybe early 60s, when he spent summers in Westport exploring the possibilities of watercolor, something that he'd pursue for the rest of his life. My father used to say in art school, they teach you about the history of art, about the mechanics of making art, and the properties of various mediums, but the one thing they do not teach is what to paint. In speaking with young artists who've come to me and expressed concerns about this, about finding their subject, I've told them what I found to be the answer as a representational painter. Paint what you know. Paint what has been in front of you your entire life, what you're familiar with, and what you've come to love. In Road, Sherwood Island, David Levine was doing just that. It's why in all of his work, including his caricatures, the viewer gets a powerful sense of intimate knowledge of the subject. His parents had a summer home in Westport off of Easton Road, and he traveled locally painting. In 1962, my parents purchased a home near Campo Beach. Road, Sherwood Island is painted early in his career when he was learning the basics of watercolor by studying the works of the great English watercolorists, Cotman, Cox, Girton, and of course, Turner. My father grew up in Brooklyn, another town on the water like Westport, and he would return to the theme of the beach for subject matter countless times for the rest of his life, whether it was Campo in Westport, Coney Island in Brooklyn, or here at Sherwood Island. He used to say that the beach was where we could find men and women at rest after they'd put in their share of work during the week, making the things that the rest of us need to live, he would say. In his later paintings, he focused more on honoring the common person by elevating them as central subjects in the tapestry of life he adored. But in this early work, we see that first inkling of that thought. Sherwood Island Beach, and Campo in the distance, as a place to rest.
I'm Linda Gramatke Smith, and I grew up in a family of artists. My parents, Hardy Gramatke and Dorothea Cook Gramatke, known as Doppy, both loved to paint and each produced illustrations for magazines and children's books and created many fine art watercolors. Dad is most well known as the author and illustrator of Little Toot, the tugboat in New York Harbor that the Library of Congress designated a children's book classic. I was 3 years old when we moved to Westport in 1946. Westport was known as an artist colony, and the town's reputation only grew throughout the 1950s with the opening of America's most popular art correspondence school, the famous Artist School. Dad illustrated children's books, and though he never joined the teaching staff at the famous Artist School, his closest friends, Stephen DeHanas and Walter Du Bois Richards, were both artists and instructors at the school. Steve and Wally, as my dad called them, trained at the Cleveland Institute of Art and followed each other throughout their professional and personal lives, working for the magazine houses and advertising agencies of New York City and settling in neighboring towns of still rural 1940s Connecticut. Steve DeHanas and his wife Margie Kovacs lived in Westport, and Wally Richards and his artist wife Lenora Case lived in New Canaan. Dad was particularly close with both Steve and Wally. In 1948, they gathered 12 artist friends to form the Fairfield Watercolor Group. Each member agreed to produce one watercolor painting each month and host a meal in turn. Mostly their wives did it. This opportunity to work for personal satisfaction rather than commercial gain resulted in lifelong friendships and many fruitful exchanges, which sometimes included the artwork themselves. This watercolor by Wally Richards was donated to WestPAC by Steve Hannes. While Richards was most known for his work as a lithographer, this watercolor of a rustic barn demonstrates Richards' skilled handling of subtle tones, brushwork, and pen and ink. It also conveys his love for the local landscape.
Chip's Window is Charles Reade's painted tribute to his friend Alfred Chip Chadbourne, a fellow instructor at the famous artist school in the 1960s and the early 1970s. The Mail Order Art School was founded in Westport in 1948 by Al Dorn, Norman Rockwell, and other renowned artists. In this painting, Reade employs broad, loose brushstrokes and color to render the view of the Saugatuck River from Chip Chadbourne's desk. Seasoned instructors like Chadbourne had their own offices at the school's headquarters to review and critique students' mailed-in artwork. The famous artist school was at its peak in the 1950s and 60s, when there were few opportunities for people outside large cities to take art classes. At the time, it was Westport's largest business, and there were many behind-the-scenes departments that contributed to the school's success. In the late 1950s, Syracuse University School of Art graduate Diane Kane was hired by Al Dorn as the first and only female in the graphic design department. Working side by side in a bullpen of cubicles, the graphic design department prepared the printed material for the distant learning art school, from the student lesson books to the magazine ads and other publications. In producing this narrated slideshow, Diane shared her memories with us. The school's instructors were accomplished painters and illustrators, and most had their own freelance projects, then went on to become well known in their fields. I got to know many artists, including Charlie Reade. The famous artist school was also a great place to work. We would go out at lunchtime to sketch scenes around town. There were art exhibitions, painting sessions, lectures by visiting artists, and even trips to New York City to see various illustrators' shows. To celebrate, Dorn would also take us out to lunch at the Red Barn, where he had a special table.
This is David Westmoreland from the Norwalk Historical Society. In this painting, which is part of Westport's bicentennial collection, Peter Michael Gish captures, with deft brushwork and luminous color, the timeless beauty of the urban setting through which the Norwalk River flows. Painted in the mid-1970s, Gish executed this landscape out of doors on an easel set up at Norwalk's Oystershell Park, a capped landfill turned into a park which still affords this view today. Gish remembers painting it in late winter, early spring, a mid-season moment confirmed by the traces of thawing ice on the water and snow along the riverbank, each delicately rendered with touches of white paint. Captivated by the graceful and poetic nature of the river scene, Gish focused his eye and brush on the Norwalk River Railroad Bridge built in 1896 for the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad. This 564-foot-long swing bridge, one of the oldest movable bridges in the region and is referred to as the Walk Bridge, which is short for Norwalk. The bridge is listed on the National Register of Historic Places as an engineering feat. The High Tower is a component of the railroad's pioneering mainline electrification completed in 1914, and is an iconic landmark in Norwalk. Unfortunately, the DOT is scheduled to replace the bridge and high towers in the next couple of years. Nestled along the riverbank and rail lines are Gish's broadly brushed and colorful renderings of remnant warehouses, wharfs, shops, and factory buildings where coal and raw materials were once brought in and finished products shipped out. Collectively, Gish's landscape pays tribute to the pivotal role the river and railroad played in the economic, social, and transportation history of our regions and the state. This is certainly one of my favorite views in Norwalk, and Gish captures it brilliantly.
The nostalgic serenity of a summer day is captured by Robert Lambden in Summer in the Berkshires. At the time of this painting, Lambden, who had moved to Westport in 1918, was a highly regarded illustrator and muralist. Westporters know Lambden best for 2 murals he painted under the federally funded Depression-era WPA project. You can see his pageant of juvenile literature painted for Saugatuck School, which today hangs at Staples High School, and his The Spirit of Adventure can be seen at Town Hall, formerly Bedford Elementary School. Since we do not often see his smaller canvases, this one is of special interest. This bucolic farm scene was given to WestPAC by Ruth Stein-Krauss Cohen, whose father was chairman of Bridgeport Brass Company and who collected paintings and prints by artists of his hometown community.
I'm Kristen McKinney, and I work with Bernie Fuchs while producing Martin West's award-winning documentary, Years in the Making, A Journey into Late Life Creativity. In a world of distraction, how does an illustrator attract and connect with an audience? In a 1964 edition of Illustrators magazine, Bernie Fuchs tells us, "The picture has only that tiny instant when it stops forever and has to make someone see. It has to hold him there long enough for his imagination to wander through the moment and feel, not literally, but imaginatively, the sensation of a movement, a sound, a memory, or an anticipation of the next instant, which can only be conjecture in the mind." Fuchs' painting The Grass Harp was published as an illustration for the Reader's Digest condensed books publication of Truman Capote's 1951 novel. Fuchs' innovation of the field of illustration was relentless. As the youngest member ever to be inducted into the Society of Illustrators, former director Terrence Brown writes, "Bernie Fuchs was to his generation what Norman Rockwell was to his. Fuchs broke ground visually and compositionally. His images often incorporated interesting viewpoints along with his trademark dramatic lighting, with a thinned oil wash over a deft charcoal drawing as his medium." Moving to Westport in 1959, Bernie and high school sweetheart Anna Lee Hess raised 3 children. Highly sought as an instructor and mentor throughout his association with the famous artist school, Fuchs' work continues to inspire the imaginations of audiences today.
Lisa Darty's acid flash vibrates with color. The articulated red task lamp frames a glowing geometry of shape and shadow. The artist's table is strewn with loose papers, glass bottles of fluorescent-colored artist's ink, and a tin of brightly hued markers and brushes. Lisa Darty married author and artist Charles Darty, son of the artist's parents James Darty and Sonia Medvedeva. Living and working alongside her husband and famous in-laws in their Western home and studio, Lisa Darty surrounded herself with love and inspiration from every angle. This large canvas hangs outside the studio classrooms at the Westport Center for senior activities. The Westport Center is fortunate to boast an offering of over 400 courses each quarter. Painting instructor Lisa Arnold states, "I find the art pieces that hang at the center to be a comfort because they are part of Westport's history. I also find some of the work exciting like acid flash. Painted in the 1980s, the color commands the viewer to study the studio still life and its ever so vibrant color. The artworks at the center do not go unnoticed. Many of Arnold's students comment on them in class and even talk of finding new discoveries simply by looking at them again and again over the years. The Westport Center can be a real sanctuary for art students." Lisa Arnold recounts, "I am lucky to come to know students who have a real artistic talent. It's an inspiring and safe place for seniors who want to explore or rekindle."
I'm Lucy Salick, and this is my painting, the Studio Floor Still Life number 4, which is one of a series of 14 paintings about studio equipment and other works that I've made strewn on the floor, watercolor sketches, exhibition announcements, letters, in addition to the studio brushes and rags that we use. But for a long time I worked with acrylic and oil paint, starting off with acrylic and finishing with oil paint. And so this painting of acrylic tubes of paint is kind of significant in that sense that, that was a big deal to have acrylic paint. You could do a lot of different things with it. And it dried and it allowed for other ways of producing work. It's interesting that the subject matter, believe it or not, was a surprise to people. I mean, it seems ridiculous now to think of that, but instead of apples and oranges, to use some other types of things and call them still life was, especially the more personal things, bothered people in some way. And I was really surprised. I had no idea that that would happen.
Hello, I'm Catherine Ross, local artist and art instructor. After moving, my Aunt Jill Barris donated this beautiful painting to the town. The artist, Ann Tolson, lived in Westport briefly in the 1990s. Like other artists, she was drawn to the bold geometry of Campo Beach public showers, and with its distinctive brick arched lintels, and to the silhouettes of the bathers inside. The flattened forms, simplified detail, and bright colors seen in this canvas are the hallmarks of Tolson's style. I am mainly interested in painting figures, Tolson wrote in an artist statement. I like to get a rapport, either between a single person and her surroundings or between two figures or groups. Young people are so in touch with each other, and I try to develop a feeling of togetherness. Older people are more in a world of their own, and I try to capture that feeling of detachment. Tolson painted and raised a family alongside her husband David in England, Westport, and later New Hampshire. Tolson loved working out of doors in the bright sunlight that gave clear-cut shapes to her paintings.
Following 17 turbulent years in New York as an activist and artist pioneer of social realism, surrealism, and abstract expressionism, in 1944, Walter Quirt joined the faculty at the University of Minnesota. In a 1958 exhibition of his work at the University Art Gallery, Quirt remarked, "This is the ideal environment for the new art, an art which returns to the human figure. New York is the better location for the non-objective painter, not for the painter of people." Walter Quirt drew and painted many scenes of people at play at nearby Lake Harriet in Minneapolis, where he and his wife Eleanor raised 3 boys. North Shore, shown here, depicts a woman and a child on a day at the beach, showing perhaps a personal reflection of the artist's own family.
Hello, I'm Emily Lux. I donated the red rug to the Westport School's Permanent Art Collection Committee when I moved house in 2005. I had served on this committee for many years. One of the highlights of my experience was installing all the art in the newly opened Bedford Middle School and Staples High School with the wonderful Molly Donovan and Howard Muntz. Boy, did we have some fun. The many volunteer members of this collection have dedicated hundreds of their hours of time conserving and curating the collection. So for me, it was a privilege to donate a work of art. The red rug is one of 3 paintings I bought by the Westchester artist Belle Manis in the late 1990s from the Soho Gallery in Redding, Connecticut. I was drawn to Belle's bold use of color. In the red rug, her energetic linear brushstrokes are tempered by blocks of saturated color. I would guess that this painting, the quietest of the 3 I bought, was painted somewhere between 1997 and 2000. Belle's paintings are poetic, rhythmic, and musical. They're also somewhat narrative. As one of my painter friends said, they feel as if they have stories behind them, even though they are abstract. If I were to create an art history recipe for Belle's style, it would include a little de Kooning, a dash of Krasner, some hints of Rothko, and maybe even some Cecily Brown. Bella Manis is most definitely a painter in the New York School of Abstract Expressionism.
I'm Kristen McKinney, and I worked with Tracy Sugarman while producing Martin West's award-winning documentary, Years in the Making, A Journey into Late Life Creativity. Throughout his life, Tracy Sugarman used his talents as a writer, illustrator, and filmmaker to affirm the importance of fighting for truth and justice for all. As an artist who excelled at on-the-spot sketches and pen-and-ink drawings, Sugarman worked primarily in a realistic representational mode. When post-war optimism waned in the early 1960s, Sugarman found himself enrolled in an abstract painting course at the Brooklyn Museum alongside fellow Westport illustrators Ward Brackett, Dolly Tingle, Arthur Silstone, and Ken Riley. In his 2007 memoir, Drawing Conclusions, Sugarman recalls, "It was a wondrous journey and a frightening one. I had to learn a visual language summoned from my unconscious, responding to imperatives that made themselves evident only in painted gesture, in color, and in the relative proximity of shapes within my frame. This untitled canvas, a collage of jagged shapes spiraling outward from a tangled center, may have been a product of that creative experimentation. In 1964, Sugarman returned to repertorial art with renewed clarity and purpose. Struggle and change, Sugarman understood, is persistent and ever-present." Longtime Westport artists Elaine Kaufman-Feiner and Howard Muntz each donated several works to the Westport Public Art Collections that continue to inspire and provoke audiences and artists today. The works seen here demonstrate two distinct approaches to the artist's dilemma of how to portray form and content. In the pair of flanking still lifes by Elaine Kaufman-Feiner, the viewer is granted a 3/4 overhead view of the table, set with delicately rendered plants and fleshy geometric fruits and vegetables. The object's form glows with Feiner's application of scrubbed-rich color, echoing the style of many of her abstract canvases. The artist Howard Muntz enjoyed a rich career as an illustrator and Madison Avenue art director. As painter, he approaches the subject of a table and pantry brimming with fresh and preserved fruits and vegetables with directness and humor. In Muntz's hands, each fruit is an exploration of shape and color, and each container is an opportunity to explore shape, shadow, and reflection. Actively painting, teaching, and writing throughout his life, Howard Muntz constantly shared new ways to see and experience the world.
Well, this is Hercules. They're all 5 silkscreens are named after movie stars who I admire. And they're named after stars in the firmament. So she is Hercules, and it's a silkscreen embossed. It's about 30 by 20 inches. It was done in 1976 as a commissioned group by a collector named Herbert Lust, whose wife Virginia Lust ran a gallery in Soho, and they had 5 of them on exhibition there with related drawings. She is based on Betty Davis, but I don't use the actual faces of the movie stars. I've never done that. I've just called in models who look like them or who feel like them. So I had Betty Davis visit here, and that inspired me to use her as one of the stars. No, these are 5, the only 5 silkscreens I've ever done. I did 5 of them, became highly, highly allergic to the materials, and I never worked in silkscreen again, never. So these are unique, and they are in collections all over the United States, and I only have one of each left.